Daniel stood in the center of the nursery, his hand resting on Lucy's hip in a way that was far too familiar, far too comfortable. Lucy's head was tilted toward him, her lips curved in a smile that looked nothing like friendship. They were standing close, too close, their bodies angled toward each other like magnets that had finally found their match. When the door creaked, they jumped apart like children caught stealing candy. Sophie's voice came out strangled and raw. "Daniel, what is going on?" Daniel's face went pale, his eyes wide with something that looked like panic. He raised his hands as if he could physically push away the scene Sophie had just witnessed. "Soph, it's not what it looks like." The words hit Sophie like a slap. Not what it looks like. The oldest lie in the book, and he was serving it to her on the day of her baby shower, in the room where their child would sleep. Rage bubbled up inside her, hot and bitter, mixing with the hurt that was spreading through her chest like poison. "On the day of my baby shower," Sophie's voice rose, shaking with emotion. "With her." Lucy stepped forward, her expression a mask of false innocence that made Sophie want to scream. "Daniel was just helping me move something, that's all."
But this story didn't begin here. Before we dive into the drama, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel.
Grab your popcorn, settle in, because what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about people. Done all that? Good, let's begin.
To understand Sophie's story, we must go back to where it all started. The sun hung high over Lagos, casting golden light through the windows of Sophie and Daniel's home in Lekki. Laughter echoed from the living room where friends and family had gathered, their voices rising and falling like waves against the shore. Balloons in shades of blue and white bobbed against the ceiling, and a table overflowed with gifts wrapped in shimmering paper. This was supposed to be the happiest day of Sophie's life, the day everyone celebrated the child growing inside her, the family she and Daniel were building together. Sophie stood near the refreshment table, one hand resting on her swollen belly as she smiled at her guests. Her mother, Elena, was showing off the tiny bouteilles she had knitted, and Daniel's mother was cooing over the nursery photos on someone's phone. Everything looked perfect, like a scene from a magazine spread about the ideal family. But something felt off, like a shadow creeping across the sun. Daniel had excused himself 20 minutes ago, saying he needed to get the china plates for the appetizers. 20 minutes was too long for such a simple task, and Sophie felt a strange tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with the baby pressing against her ribs. She glanced around the room, searching for him, but he was nowhere to be seen. Lucy, her colleague and supposed friend, was also missing. Sophie's smile faltered for just a moment before she caught herself. She was being paranoid, she told herself. The pregnancy hormones were making her emotional and suspicious. Daniel loved her. Lucy was her friend. There was nothing to worry about. But even as she tried to convince herself, her feet were already moving toward the hallway, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name. The nursery door was slightly ajar, and Sophie's heart began to pound in a rhythm that felt wrong, too fast, too urgent. She could hear voices inside, low and intimate, the kind of whispers that didn't belong in a room meant for her unborn child. Her hand trembled as she pushed the door open wider, and then the world stopped. Daniel stood in the center of the nursery, his hand resting on Lucy's hip in a way that was far too familiar, far too comfortable. Lucy's head was tilted toward him, her lips curved in a smile that looked nothing like friendship. They were standing close, too close, their bodies angled toward each other like magnets that had finally found their match. When the door creaked, they jumped apart like children caught stealing candy. Sophie's voice came out strangled and raw. "Daniel, what is going on?" Daniel's face went pale, his eyes wide with something that looked like panic. He raised his hands as if he could physically push away the scene Sophie had just witnessed. "Soph, it's not what it looks like." The words hit Sophie like a slap. Not what it looks like. The oldest lie in the book, and he was serving it to her on the day of her baby shower, in the room where their child would sleep. Rage bubbled up inside her, hot and bitter, mixing with the hurt that was spreading through her chest like poison. "On the day of my baby shower," Sophie's voice rose, shaking with emotion. "With her." Lucy stepped forward, her expression a mask of false innocence that made Sophie want to scream. "Daniel was just helping me move something, that's all." Sophie's laugh was harsh and broken. "Helping you? Really, that's what you're going to go with?" She turned to Daniel, her eyes burning with tears she refused to let fall. "You said you were getting the china plates for the appetizers. Everyone's waiting for you out there. My mom, your mom, our friends, everyone." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "This is nothing, Soph. We just came in here to talk and Lucy wanted." "You're in our baby's room with my friend," Sophie interrupted, her voice dropping to something cold and deadly. If I hadn't just walked in here, I never would have seen. It wasn't like that, Lucy said quickly, but her voice lacked conviction. Sophie turned on her, and for a moment the betrayal from Lucy hurt even more than Daniel's. But what is it like? Because you're my friend, you come to my house, you brought presents, you smile, and then what? You cozy up with my husband. Daniel reached for Sophie's arm, but she jerked away from him as if his touch burned. You're tired, you're overstressed from the pregnancy, and… Do not use this pregnancy as an excuse for what you're doing, Sophie snapped, her voice cracking with the weight of her anger and heartbreak. Daniel's face twisted with something that might have been guilt or might have been frustration. I made a mistake, okay? I came out here to move something and… And what? Sophie's voice was rising again, spiraling out of control. Your hand accidentally slipped onto her hip. Soph, I'm sorry. I promise you this has never happened before. The apology felt hollow, meaningless, like throwing a bandage on a wound that needed stitches. Sophie shook her head, backing toward the door. You think sorry's going to fix it? You think it's going to make me unsee everything that I just saw? Lucy crossed her arms, her mask slipping to reveal something ugly underneath. You're overreacting, it was harmless. The audacity of those words stole Sophie's breath. She stared at Lucy, at this woman she had trusted, and wondered how she had been so blind. Your audacity, Sophie whispered, and then louder. You are in here sneaking around with her while everyone's out there celebrating our baby. Daniel moved toward her again, his hands outstretched in a gesture of appeasement. Okay, calm down, all right. This cannot be good for the baby. Something inside Sophie snapped. She pointed a shaking finger at Daniel, her whole body trembling with fury. Don't you dare pretend to care about this child. You had no problem destroying this family a second ago. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Sophie could feel the tears threatening to spill over, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Not here, not now. And you know what's funny? Sophie's voice broke, but she pushed through it. I felt it, the distance, the fake smiles. You don't touch me like I matter anymore. And I said to myself, it's okay, you know, because he's stressed. He's tired, I defended you. Daniel's face crumpled, but Sophie didn't care. She was done protecting his feelings, done making excuses for the coldness that had crept into their marriage like frost on a window. This isn't the time, Daniel said quietly. It's certainly not the place. Sophie's laugh was bitter. Then when is the time or the place to catch my husband flirting with my friend? From the hallway, her mother's voice called out, cheerful and unsuspecting. Soph, where are you? Sophie looked at Daniel one last time, her heart breaking into pieces she wasn't sure she could ever put back together. We'll talk about this later, when there's no one else you can lie to. She turned to include Lucy in her glare. You two ruined the hup-up's day of my life. As Sophie turned to leave, her vision blurred with tears and rage, her foot caught on the edge of the nursery rug. She stumbled, her hand flying out to catch herself against the duffrum, her pregnant belly lurching forward in a moment of terrifying imbalance. Wait, Soph, what? Daniel started, reaching for her. But Sophie caught herself, her heart pounding with adrenaline and fear. She straightened up, one hand protectively cradling her belly, and walked out of the nursery without looking back. Had she just witnessed the end of her marriage in the room meant for new beginnings? The answer was waiting for her in the eyes of the guests, who still believed in the perfect couple's fairy tale. Sophie made it to the bathroom before the tears came, hot and angry and unstoppable. She locked the door behind her and pressed her back against it, sliding down until she was sitting on the cool tile floor, one hand clutched over her mouth to muffle the sobs that were trying to escape. The other hand rested on her belly, where the baby kicked as if sensing her mother's distress. Everything hurts. Her chest, her head, her heart, especially her heart. She had walked away from that nursery on shaking legs, somehow managing to paste a smile on her face as she passed her mother in the hallway. Eleanor had been too busy chatting with Daniel's aunt to notice the tremor in Sophie's hands or the glassiness in her eyes. Thank God for small mercies. Sophie couldn't bear to explain what she had just seen, not yet, not when she could barely process it herself. There was a soft knock on the bathroom door, and Maya's voice came through, low and concerned. Sup, Mum, you in there? Sophie's relief was immediate and overwhelming. Maya, her best friend since their university days at Yanalug, the one person who could always tell when something was wrong, even when Sophie tried to hide it. She wiped her eyes quickly and opened the door just enough for Maya to slip inside. Maya took one look at Sophie's face, and her expression shifted from concern to alarm. Okay, you are officially scaring me. What happened? Did someone say something about the nursery decor again? Sophie shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. No, it's Daniel. I walked in on him with Lucy. Maya's eyes went wide, and for a moment she just stared at Sophie as if waiting for the punchline of a very bad joke. Lucy, Lucy, you're Lucy, the one with the perfect manicure and the fake laugh. Yeah, Sophie whispered, the word barely audible. Maya's mouth fell open. Come on, our Daniel. He couldn't even kill a spider without having a moral conflict about it. Are you sure? The doubt in Maya's voice strung, even though Sophie knew her friend meant well. His hand was on her hip, Maya, and when I walked in, they jumped apart like I'd caught them doing something they knew was wrong. Maya's face hardened, the doubt replaced by fury. Are you sure? Maybe it just looked worse than it was. Sophie felt something break inside her all over again. I'm not crazy, Maya, I know what I saw. He said he was getting the china plates for the appetizers, and then I walked in on him with her in our baby's room. Her voice cracked on the last words. Maya pulled Sophie into a fierce hug, and Sophie buried her face in her friend's shoulder, letting herself cry properly for the first time since leaving the nursery. Maya rubbered circles on her back, murmuring comforting words that Sophie couldn't quite make out over the sound of her own sobbing. When Sophie finally pulled away, Maya's expression was dark with anger. So everyone's out there celebrating the golden couple, the perfect parents-to-be, perfect my foot. Sophie let out a watery laugh that turned into another sob. She pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes, trying to stop the tears that wouldn't quit. I don't know what to do. Everyone's here. They're all expecting me to be happy and glowing and grateful. Maya's jaw set in a way Sophie recognized. It was her fighting stance, the look she got when someone she loved was being hurt. Look, you shouldn't have to sit through this nonsense. Let me go out there and give them a piece of my mind. I'll tell everyone what Daniel did and we'll send them all home. No, Sophie said quickly, panic rising in her chest. I don't even know what I saw. Maybe he's right. Maybe I was overreacting. He was just helping her move something. Maya grabbed Sophie's shoulders, forcing her to make eye contact. No, you are not going to let yourself be easily manipulated. That's what he wants, Sophie, the benefit of your doubt. He wants you to question what you saw with your own eyes. Sophie's chin trembled. There's so many people here, Maya. Honestly, I'm ashamed. Ashamed? Maya's voice rose with indignation. You have nothing to be ashamed of. He's the one who should be ashamed. Then we put an end to it. I'll march down there right now and send every single one of them home. Sophie shook her head violently. No, I don't want to cause a scene in front of everyone. My mom, his mom, they're all out there having such a good time. Maya's expression softened, but the anger still simmered in her eyes. Sophie, you shouldn't have to sit there pretending while he acts like the perfect husband. That's torture. Sophie slid back down to sit on the bathroom floor, her head in her hands. I just don't even know how to react, Maya, and I don't know what's worse. What he did, or how small it makes me feel to just stand there and watch him do it. Maya sat down beside her, taking Sophie's hand in both of hers. Okay, hey, you don't have to have it all figured out right now, but you will do something. When you do, I will be there right by your side, always. Sophie squeezed her friend's hand, grateful beyond words for Maya's unwavering loyalty. There's just so many people here. I just need to figure out how to get through the next few hours without falling apart. Maya nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. Okay, then that's the plan. Smile, breathe, survive the party. The storm can wait till after the guests leave. Sophie took a shaky breath, trying to calm the chaos in her chest. Just don't look at me like you feel there's something wrong. Everyone will know. Maya's lips curved in a small, fierce smile. You got it, girl. We're going to walk out there and you're going to be the most radiant mother-to-be they've ever seen. And Daniel, he's going to have to watch you shine while knowing exactly what he threw away. They stood up together and Maya helped Sophie fix her makeup, wiping away the mascara that had run down her cheeks and reapplying Sophie's lipstick with steady hands. When they finally looked in the mirror, Sophie barely recognized herself. She looked composed, even happy. Only her eyes betrayed the truth, but she could hide those behind smiles and laughter. They walked back to the living room together, arms linked like armor against the world. The party was in full swing, the noise level even higher than before. Sophie's mother was cutting the elaborate cake shaped like a baby bottle, and guests were gathered around, phones out to capture the moment. Daniel appeared at Sophie's side almost immediately, his face anxious and pleading. Soph, can we talk? Sophie turned to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Not now, Daniel, we have guests. Her voice was sweet but cold, like honey left in the freezer. Maya gave Daniel a look that could have stripped paint off walls. Yeah, Daniel, not now. She steered Sophie away from him, toward the cake table where Elena was waving them over. Elena beamed at her daughter, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath Sophie's calm exterior. This is so beautiful, honey. You guys did an amazing job with everything." Sophie forced her smile wider, even as her heart continued to shatter in her chest. "Thanks, Mom. It means the world to have everyone here." "Where's my son?" Elena asked, looking around. "He's missing all this fun." Daniel's mother, Grace, appeared beside them, pride radiating from her face. "He's in the nursery fixing something. My son is such a perfectionist. He's just like his father." Sophie's smile froze on her face. The nursery, the room where her world had collapsed less than an hour ago. Maya squeezed her hand tightly, a silent reminder of their plan. Smile, breathe, survive. A small girl, one of Daniel's young cousins, tugged on Sophie's dress. "Aunt Sophie, isn't this cake cute? I can't wait to meet my cousin." Sophie looked down at the child's innocent face and felt her heart crack a little more. This baby deserved better than parents who couldn't trust each other. This baby deserved a family built on truth, not lies hidden in nursery corners. "Me too, sweetie," Sophie managed to say, her voice thick with emotion she couldn't quite hide. "Me too." Maya leaned close to Sophie's ear and whispered, "You're doing great, just a little longer." But as Sophie looked around the room at all the smiling faces, at the decorations celebrating a future that suddenly felt uncertain, at Daniel watching her from across the room with guilt written all over his face, she wondered how much longer she could keep pretending. And then Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. She grabbed Sophie's arm, her fingers digging in urgently. "You mind if I steal the mom-to-be for a sec?" Maya said to Elena with a brightness that sounded forced. "I promised to bring her back before dessert." Elena waved them away with a smile. "Come right back though, we're about to open presents." Maya practically dragged Sophie to the guest bedroom, closing the door firmly behind them. Her hands were shaking as she held up her phone. "What is it?" Sophie asked, fear creeping up her spine. Maya's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "The baby cam, from the nursery, the one I gave you as a gift." Sophie's heart began to pound, but we never set it up. Maya's smile was grim and vengeful. "I installed it earlier today when I arrived. I wanted to surprise you." She turned the phone screen towards Sophie. "Before you go back out there, you might want to see this." Sophie looked at the screen and the world tilted sideways. It was a video, time-stamped from half an hour ago. Daniel and Lucy in the nursery, standing closer than any married man should stand with a woman who wasn't his wife. And then Daniel leaned in, his lips brushing Lucy's ear as he whispered something that made her laugh. "You don't have to have any doubts anymore," Maya said softly. "This is it, this is proof." Sophie stared at the video, watching her husband betray her on camera, and something cold and hard settled in her chest where her heart used to be. Was this evidence about to destroy more than just her marriage? The truth was about to explode like a bomb in the middle of her baby shower. Sophie couldn't breathe. The air in the guest bedroom felt too thick, too heavy, like trying to inhale water instead of oxygen. She stared at Maya's phone screen, watching the video loop over and over, Daniel leaning in close to Lucy. Lucy's hand touching his arm. The intimate way they stood together, like they had done this before, like this was comfortable and familiar and everything Sophie had feared but refused to believe. "Stop," Sophie whispered, her voice cracking. "Please stop the video." Maya paused it, but the damage was done. The image was burned into Sophie's mind now, permanent and unforgiving. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hands trembling so badly she had to clasp them together to make them stop. "I'm so sorry, Sophie," Maya said, sitting beside her. "But you needed to see it. You needed to know you weren't imagining things or overreacting like he tried to make you believe." Sophie nodded numbly. She had known, of course. She had seen it with her own eyes in the nursery, but knowing and having proof were two different things. Proof made it real in a way that couldn't be undone or explained away. Proof meant she had to do something about it. "What am I going to do?" Sophie asked, and she hated how small her voice sounded, how broken and lost. Maya's jaw tightened with determination. "We're going to show this to your mother." Sophie's head snapped up, panic flooding through her. "No, absolutely not. My mom has a heart condition, Maya, the stress could." "She has a right to know what kind of man her daughter married," Maya interrupted, her voice firm but gentle. "And you need her support right now. You can't carry this alone, Sophie." Sophie wanted to argue, but before she could find the words, there was a knock on the door. Elena's voice came through, warm and concerned. "Sophie, honey, is everything all right in there?" Maya looked at Sophie, a question in her eyes. Sophie took a deep breath and nodded. There was no more hiding, no more pretending. The truth was going to come out one way or another, and maybe it was better this way, with her mother by her side. "Come in, Mom," Sophie called out, her voice steadier than she felt. Elena opened the door, her smile fading the moment she saw Sophie's face. A mother always knows, Sophie thought. Elena had probably known something was wrong the moment Sophie walked past her in the hallway earlier, but she had given her daughter space to handle it. Now that space was collapsing. "Here she is, my beautiful girl," Elena said, trying to keep her tone light, but worry creased her forehead. "Honey, hey, what's wrong?" Sophie's chin trembled, and she pressed her lips together hard, trying not to cry again. She had cried so much already, and she was tired of tears. But her mother's concern, the love and protection in Elena's eyes, broke something loose inside her. "It's Daniel," Sophie managed to say. Maya stood up, her expression grim. "Mrs. Elena, I think you need to see something." Elena's face went pale, and she moved quickly to sit beside Sophie, one arm wrapping around her daughter's shoulders. "What happened? Did he hurt you?" "Not physically," Sophie whispered, "but yes, he hurt me." Maya held out her phone, and Elena took it with shaking hands. Sophie couldn't watch her mother's face as the video played. She stared at her own hands instead, at the engagement ring Daniel had given her 3 years ago when they were young and hopeful, and so sure their love could weather anything. What a lie that had been. Elena made a small, wounded sound, and Sophie finally looked up. Her mother's face had gone from pale to flushed, 2 spots of angry colour high on her cheeks. Her eyes blazed with a fury Sophie had rarely seen. "And who in God's name is that woman?" Elena demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "It's Lucy," Maya said. "Sophie's colleague from work. This video is from today, not even from an hour ago, actually." Elena's hand tightened on the phone so hard Sophie was afraid she might crack the screen. "Where is he?" "I think he's back inside with everyone else, pretending nothing's wrong," Maya said, and the contempt in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Elena stood up, and Sophie had never seen her mother look so fierce, so dangerous. She was a small woman, barely 5'4", but in that moment she seemed 10 feet tall and made of steel and fire. "It's time everyone stops pretending. He will regret this day for the rest of his life." "Mom, wait," Sophie started, but Elena was already moving toward the door with purpose in every step. Sophie and Maya exchanged glances and then hurried after her. The party noise grew louder as they approached the living room, laughter and music, and the clink of glasses, all the sounds of celebration that now felt obscene and wrong. How could people be happy when Sophie's world was ending? Elena stormed into the living room like a hurricane, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Daniel. He was standing near the refreshment table, talking to his uncle, and holding a plate of small chops as if this were any normal day, as if he hadn't just destroyed his family. "Daniel," Elena's voice cut through the party chatter like a knife, sharp and furious. The room went quiet. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone fumbled with the speaker and the music cut off abruptly. Everyone turned to stare at Elena, confusion and concern on their faces. Daniel's smile faltered. He set down his plate and moved toward Elena, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mom, Elena, is everything okay?" "Don't you dare call me that," Elena spat, and the venom in her voice made several people gasp. "You think I'm blind? I built a life teaching my daughter how to spot men like you, and you made a mockery of her trust." Daniel's face went white. He glanced at Sophie, who stood frozen near the doorway with Maya beside her, and then back at Elena. "It's not what it looks like." "Don't insult my intelligence," Elena said, her voice rising. "You can't lie your way out of this." Daniel's mother, Grace, pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of confusion and growing horror. "Elena, what's going on? What are you talking about?" "Ask your son," Elena said coldly. "Ask him what he was doing in the nursery with that woman while my daughter was out here hosting a party to celebrate their child." Grace turned to Daniel, and Sophie saw the moment understanding dawned on her face, followed quickly by denial. "Daniel, tell them this is a misunderstanding." Daniel's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked trapped, cornered, like an animal that knew escape was impossible. "Please," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you think." "You betrayed her in her own home," Elena continued, her voice shaking with emotion. "You humiliated her in front of the people who love her the most, on the day we're supposed to be celebrating your child." The room erupted in whispers. Guests were looking at each other, at Daniel, at Sophie. Some looked shocked, others looked like they had suspected something all along. Sophie felt exposed, like she was standing naked in front of everyone, her pain and humiliation on display for them all to see. "What's going on?" someone asked. "What's all this yelling?" "It's just a misunderstanding," Daniel said desperately, but his voice lacked conviction. Maya stepped forward, holding up her phone. "Misunderstanding, that's his misunderstanding caught on tape." Grace moved to Daniel's side, her face stricken. "Sweetheart, this can't be true. Daniel, tell me this man, tell me your mother-in-law is lying. Tell me it's not true, please." Daniel looked at his mother, and Sophie saw the exact moment he realized he couldn't lie anymore. His shoulders sagged, and he ran a hand over his face. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." Grace recoiled as if he had slapped her. "You disgust me. What kind of man are you? Is this how you honor your family?" Daniel reached for his mother, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "Mom, please. We discovered the truth about you before my grandchild was born under your roof," Grace said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank God for that, at least." "This will never happen again," Daniel said, turning to Sophie with desperation in his eyes. "I swear, Soph, this will never happen again." Alana laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. "You made that promise when you married my daughter, and you've already broken it." Sophie watched it all unfold like she was viewing a play from very far away. She saw Daniel's face, saw the guilt and shame and fear written there. She saw her mother's fury and Daniel's mother's heartbreak. She saw the guests whispering and recording on their phones, capturing this moment of family destruction for their social media feeds. And then Alana swayed, her hand flying to her chest. "Alana," Grace said, alarm replacing anger on her face. "Alana, are you?" Alana's legs buckled and she collapsed. The room exploded into chaos, screams and shouts and the thunder of people rushing forward. Sophie pushed through the crowd, her pregnant belly making movement difficult, her heart hammering with terror. "Mom," she screamed, dropping to her knees beside Alana's still form. "Mom, no, 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 no." Alana's eyes were closed, her face grey and waxy. Sophie pressed her fingers to her mother's neck, searching frantically for a pulse. "Call 911, Maya shouted, already pulling out her phone. "Someone call an ambulance." Grace knelt on Alana's other side, her hands hovering uselessly. Oh God, what have we done?" Sophie looked up at Daniel, who stood frozen in shock, and all the hurt and betrayal crystallized into pure rage. "You did this," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "You did this to her." Alana's chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. Her lips were tinged with blue. "Stay with us, Mom," Sophie buggered, taking her mother's hand. "Please stay with us. Help is coming, you're going to be fine." But as Alana lay motionless on the floor, surrounded by the ruins of what should have been a joyous celebration, Sophie knew with terrible certainty that nothing was going to be fine ever again. Would Alana survive the shock of her son-in-law's betrayal? Or had Daniel's actions just cost Sophie more than her marriage? Had they cost her the woman who gave her life? The waiting room at Lagos State University Teaching Hospital smelled like disinfectant and fear. Sophie sat in one of the hard plastic chairs, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Maya sat beside her, one arm wrapped around Sophie's shoulders, while Grace sat across from them, her face buried in her hands. Daniel paced back and forth like a caged animal, his footsteps echoing in the sterile silence. It had been 3 hours since the ambulance arrived. 3 hours since the paramedics had worked over Alana's still form while Sophie watched, her heart breaking into smaller and smaller pieces. 3 hours since they had loaded her mother into the ambulance and Sophie had climbed in after her, leaving the ruined baby shower behind like the wreckage of a shipwreck. The other guests had scattered quickly once the ambulance arrived, offering hurried condolences and promises to pray. But Sophie knew what they were really doing. They were rushing home to call their friends and family, to spread the gossip about the baby shower that ended in scandal and tragedy. By tomorrow, everyone in their social circle would know that Daniel had been caught with another woman and that the shock had nearly killed Sophie's mother. The thought made Sophie want to scream, but she had no screams left. She was hollowed out, empty except for the fear that pulsed through her veins with every heartbeat. Her mother had to be okay. She had to be. Sophie couldn't lose her, not now, not like this. Not when Sophie needed her most. A doctor emerged from the double doors that led to the emergency ward, and they all surged to their feet. The doctor was a tall woman with kind eyes and exhaustion written in the lines of her face. She looked at the group, and her gaze settled on Sophie. "Are you Mrs. Eleanor Akankwa's daughter?" the doctor asked. Sophie nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Your mother suffered a severe stress-induced cardiac event," the doctor said, her voice gentle but direct. "We've managed to stabilize her, but the next 24 hours are critical. She needs complete rest and absolutely no stress." The shock to her system was significant. Relief and terror wad in Sophie's chest. Stable was good. Stable meant alive, but critical meant Alana wasn't out of danger yet. "Can I see her?" Sophie asked, her voice small and desperate. "Yes, but only for a few minutes," the doctor said. "And only immediate family. She needs to stay calm." Sophie moved toward the doors, but Daniel stepped forward too. "I should come with you." The doctor held up a hand. "I said immediate family only. And given that Mrs. Okonkwo's condition was triggered by emotional distress, I would suggest that whoever caused that distress stays far away from her room." Daniel's face flushed red with shame and he stepped back. Grace let out a small sob and Maya squeezed Sophie's hand. The doctor's words were professional, but the judgment behind them was clear. Everyone knew what had happened. The paramedics had heard the shouting at the house. The nurses had probably heard it from them. Daniel's betrayal was now public knowledge, stamped into the medical records of Eleanor's near-death experience. Sophie followed the doctor through the double doors and down a long corridor lined with rooms full of beeping machines and suffering. The hospital was overcrowded as always, beds in hallways and nurses rushing between patients. But the doctor led her to a private room at the end of the hall, and Sophie was grateful for the small mercy of privacy. Eleanor lay in the hospital bed, small and fragile beneath the white sheets. Wires connected her to monitors that beeped steadily, tracking her heart rate and blood pressure and oxygen levels. An IV drip fed into her arm, and an oxygen cannula rested beneath her nose. She looked so vulnerable, so breakable, and Sophie felt tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. "Mom," she whispered, moving to the bedside and taking Eleanor's hand carefully, mindful of the IV. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open, and despite everything she managed a weak smile. "There's my girl." "I'm so sorry," Sophie said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I'm so sorry this happened. I never should have let you find out like that. I should have protected you." Eleanor's grip tightened slightly on Sophie's hand. "Hush now, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." "The doctor said you need to rest," Sophie said, wiping her eyes with her free hand. "You need to stay calm and get better." "I will," Eleanor promised. "But first you need to listen to me. I don't have long before they kick you out, so listen carefully." Sophie nodded, leaning closer. "That man doesn't deserve you," Eleanor said, her voice stronger than Sophie expected. "I saw the video. I saw the way he looked at that woman. And more importantly, I saw the way he looked at you when you confronted him. There was no remorse there, Sophie, only fear of getting caught." "Mom, you need to save your strength." "I've spent my whole life saving my strength," Eleanor interrupted, fire flashing in her tired eyes. "And I'll be damned if I don't use some of it now to tell you the truth. You are strong enough to leave him. You are strong enough to raise that baby on your own if you have to. And you are strong enough to demand better than a man who would betray you in your own home on the day of your baby shower." Sophie's tears fell harder, but they were different now. Not just tears of grief, but tears of recognition. Her mother was right. She knew her mother was right. But knowing and doing were two different things, especially when you were 7 months pregnant and your whole life was tangled up with the person who had hurt you. "I'm scared," Sophie admitted. "I'm scared of being alone. I'm scared of doing this without him." "You won't be alone," Eleanor said fiercely. "You'll have me, you'll have Maya. You'll have everyone who truly loves you. And that baby deserves to grow up watching their mother stand up for herself, not watching her accept betrayal and disrespect." The doctor appeared in the doorway. "Time's up, your mother needs to rest now." Sophie nodded, but she didn't let go of Elena's hand. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, baby girl," Elena said, her eyes already drifting closed. "Now go home and think about what I said, and take care of that grandbaby of mine." Sophie kissed her mother's forehead and then forced herself to walk out of the room. The corridor seemed longer on the way back, every step heavier than the last. When she pushed through the double doors into the waiting room, everyone looked up expectantly. "She's stable," Sophie said, and Grace let out a sob of relief. "But she needs rest. The doctor said the next day will tell us more." Daniel moved toward her, his face a mask of guilt and desperation. "Soph, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Your mom." "Don't," Sophie said, her voice cold and flat. "Don't you dare talk about my mother right now." "Please, can we just talk, somewhere private?" Daniel begged. Maya stood up, positioning herself between Sophie and Daniel like a bodyguard. "I think you've done enough talking for one day." Grace stood as well, and for the first time since the confrontation at the house, she looked at her son with something other than love. She looked at him with disappointment, so profound, it seemed to age her 10 years in an instant. "Daniel, we need to go home," Grace said quietly. "Sophie needs space, and we need to have a very long conversation about the man I thought I raised versus the man you've become." "But Mom," Daniel started. "No," Grace said firmly. "I stood by your father through many things, but infidelity wasn't one of them. I taught you better than this. And right now I'm ashamed to call you my son." Daniel flinched as if she had struck him, but Grace's expression didn't soften. She turned to Sophie and her eyes were full of tears. "I'm so sorry, Sophie, for what he did, for what it's cost you and your mother. You deserved so much better." Sophie nodded, unable to speak. Grace collected her purse and walked toward the exit, her shoulders straight but her steps heavy. Daniel looked at Sophie one more time, his mouth opening as if to say something, but Maya stepped forward. "Go," Maya said simply, "before you make things worse." Daniel's face crumpled, but he turned and followed his mother out of the hospital. The automatic doors slid shut behind them, and Sophie felt something inside her shift. It wasn't relief exactly, but it was something close. The absence of his presence felt like finally being able to breathe after being underwater for too long. "You okay?" Maya asked softly. Sophie shook her head. "No, but I will be." She placed a hand on her belly where the baby was moving, oblivious to the chaos of the adult world. "We both will be." Maya hugged her tightly, and Sophie let herself lean into her friend's strength. The waiting room was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of monitors. Somewhere in this hospital, her mother was fighting to recover from the shock of betrayal. And here in this waiting room, Sophie was beginning to understand that she would have to fight too. Fight for her dignity, fight for her child, fight for the future she deserved, even if it looked nothing like the one she had planned. "Let's go home," Maya said. "You need rest too, I'll stay with you tonight." Sophie nodded, but as they walked toward the exit, she glanced back at the double doors that led to her mother's room. Elena's words echoed in her mind, steady and strong despite the weakness of her body. "You are strong enough to leave him. You are strong enough to demand better." The question was, did Sophie believe it? And would she have the courage to act on her mother's wisdom before it was too late to build a new life? The answer was waiting for her at home, in the nursery where her marriage had shattered, in the choices she would have to make before her baby arrived. But first, she had to survive the night ahead. The house felt different when Sophie and Maya walked through the door. The decorations from the baby shower were still up, balloons drooping slightly from their strings, the banner reading "Welcome Baby" mocking her with its cheerfulness. Half-eaten plates of food sat on tables, abandoned in the chaos of Elena's collapse. Someone had turned off the music, but the speakers still sat in the corner, silent witnesses to the destruction of Sophie's perfect life. Maya immediately started cleaning up, moving through the living room with quick efficiency, gathering plates and cups and stuffing them into trash bags. Sophie stood in the doorway, one hand on her belly, and felt completely disconnected from everything around her. This was her home, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene, the place where her marriage had died and her mother had nearly followed. "Come sit down," Maya said gently, guiding Sophie to the couch. "You've been on your feet too long, it's not good for the baby." Sophie sat, but she couldn't seem to make her body relax. Every muscle was tense, coiled tight with stress and exhaustion, and an anger that was finally beginning to surface through the shock. She had been too scared for her mother to feel properly angry before, but now that Elena was stable, the rage was creeping back in, hot and bitter and all-consuming. "I can't stay here," Sophie said suddenly. "I can't sleep in that bed knowing what he did." Maya nodded. "Then you'll stay in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." But Sophie knew what came next. Her mother's words kept echoing in her head, insistent and impossible to ignore. "You are strong enough to leave him." The problem wasn't whether she was strong enough. The problem was whether she was brave enough. And right now, sitting in this house full of broken dreams and shattered trust, Sophie wasn't sure she had any bravery left. The front door opened and Daniel walked in. He looked terrible, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed, his whole face sagging with guilt and exhaustion. He stopped when he saw them, uncertainty written all over him. "Sophie," he said, his voice hoarse, "we need to talk." Maya stood up immediately, positioning herself between them. "I don't think that's a good idea right now." "This is my house," Daniel said, a flash of defensiveness in his tone. "And she's my wife. We need to talk about what happened." "Your house," Maya's voice was dangerously quiet. "The house where you betrayed your pregnant wife with her friend. That house." Daniel's face flushed, but he held his ground. "Maya, I appreciate you being here for Sophie, but this is between me and her." Sophie felt something crack inside her, and suddenly she was standing. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "No, Daniel, nothing is just between you and me anymore. You made sure of that when you decided to put your hands on Lucy in our baby's nursery, while our friends and family were celebrating outside." Daniel flinched. I know I messed up, that's why I'm here, I want to make this right." "Make it right," Sophie's voice rose, shaking with emotion. "How exactly do you plan to make this right? Are you going to rewind time? Are you going to erase the image of you touching her from my brain? Are you going to bring back the trust that you destroyed?" I made a mistake, Daniel said desperately. One mistake. We've been together for 5 years, Soph. Doesn't that count for something? One mistake, Sophie laughed, but it was a harsh, broken sound. Daniel, I saw the video. The way you looked at her, the way you leaned in clothes, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. How many other choices have you made that I don't know about? Daniel's eyes widened. What video? Maya held up her phone. The baby cam I installed this morning. It caught everything. Your little moment in the nursery, it's all recorded. The colour drained from Daniel's face. You recorded us. I recorded the nursery, Maya corrected coldly. You just happened to use it as your secret meeting place. Bad choice. Daniel turned back to Sophie and she saw panic replacing guilt in his eyes. Soph, please, I swear to you nothing physical happened. We were just talking. I got too close, that's all. It was inappropriate, but it wasn't an affair. Just talking, Sophie's voice dripped with sarcasm. With your hand on her hip, with your lips at her ear, what were you talking about, Daniel? What was so important that you had to whisper it like a secret? Daniel ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration that Sophie had seen 1,000 times. She was having problems at work. She asked me for advice, that's all it was. And you couldn't give her that advice with a professional distance between you, Sophie demanded. You couldn't talk to her in the living room with everyone else around. You had to sneak off to our baby's room. I didn't think it was a big deal, Daniel said weakly. That's the problem, Sophie said, and her voice dropped to something quiet and deadly. You didn't think. You didn't think about how it would look. You didn't think about how it would make me feel. You didn't think about the promises you made when we got married. You just did what you wanted, and now you're surprised that there are consequences. Daniel moved toward her, his hands outstretched. Okay, you're right, I wasn't thinking. I was selfish and stupid and I hurt you. But I love you, Soph. I love you and our baby, and I'm begging you to give me another chance to prove it. Sophie looked at those outstretched hands and remembered all the times they had held her, comforted her, promised her forever. And she remembered seeing one of those hands on Lucy's hip, casual and familiar, like he had every right to touch another woman that way. Do you love me? Sophie asked quietly. Or do you love the idea of me? The wife who cooks your meals and keeps your house and carries your child? Because the me that I am right now, the me who's hurt and angry and pregnant and heartbroken, I don't think you love her at all. That's not fair, Daniel protested. Fair, Sophie's voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that my mother is in the hospital because of what you did? Is it fair that I have to second-guess every late night at work, every phone call you take in another room, every time you pull away from me in bed? Is it fair that I'm standing here 7 months pregnant, trying to figure out if the father of my child is a man I can trust? Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't care. Let him see what he had done to her. Let him see the devastation he had caused. I'm sorry about your mom, Daniel said, and his voice cracked. God, Soph, I'm so sorry. I never meant for her to get hurt. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, Sophie said. And sorry doesn't fix it. Sorry doesn't make me unsee what I saw. Sorry doesn't make me feel safe with you again. Daniel's face crumpled, and he sank down onto the arm of the couch, his head in his hands. What do you want me to do? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'll go to counselling. I'll quit my job so I never have to see Lucy again. I'll do whatever it takes. Sophie looked at him. This man she had loved. This man who had proposed to her under the stars on Tarqua Bay. This man who had cried with joy when she told him she was pregnant. And she felt nothing but a vast, echoing emptiness where her love used to be. I want you to leave, she said quietly. Daniel's head snapped up. What? I want you to pack a bag and leave. Go stay with your mother or a friend or a hotel, I don't care. But I can't have you here right now. I can't look at you. I can't breathe the same air as you. Soph, no, please. This is my home too, our home. We can work through this if we just talk. We are talking, Sophie interrupted. And I'm telling you that I need space. I need time to think without you hovering over me, making excuses and promises you might not keep. So I'm asking you to leave, tonight. Daniel looked at Maya as if hopping for an ally, but Maya's expression was carved from stone. He looked back at Sophie, desperation written all over his face. What about the baby? I have a right to be here for my child. And you will be, Sophie said, her hand moving protectively to her belly. But right now I need you to be somewhere else. Please, Daniel, if you love me at all, if you have any respect for what we had, you'll give me this. The silence stretched between them, taut and terrible. Daniel stood slowly, and Sophie saw the moment he realized she was serious. This wasn't a fight they were going to have and then make up from with apologies and promises. This was something fundamental breaking, something that might never be repaired. Okay, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll go, but Sophie, I want you to know that I'm going to fight for us. I'm going to prove to you that I'm worth another chance. Sophie didn't respond. She just watched as he walked down the hallway to their bedroom, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. Maya sat beside her and took her hand, squeezing tight. You did the right thing, Maya whispered. Sophie wasn't sure about that. She wasn't sure about anything anymore. But she knew she couldn't share a bed with Daniel tonight, couldn't pretend that everything was okay when her entire world had collapsed. So she sat on the couch and waited while her husband packed his bags, and she tried not to think about what came next. Daniel emerged 15 minutes later with a duffel bag over his shoulder. He stopped in front of her and she saw tears on his cheeks. I love you, he said. I know you don't believe me right now, but I do, and I'm going to spend every day proving it to you. Sophie looked up at him and felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Lock the door when you leave, she said. Daniel's face twisted with pain, but he nodded. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob and looked back one more time. But Sophie had turned away, unable to watch him leave, unable to acknowledge the end of the life they had built together. The door clicked shut and the house fell silent. Maya pulled Sophie into her arms, and Sophie finally let herself cry properly, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. The baby kicked inside her, as if protesting the emotional storm, and Sophie placed her hand over the movement, trying to send comfort to her child even as she fell apart. You're so brave, Maya murmured, so strong. But Sophie didn't feel brave or strong. She felt broken and scared and utterly alone. Daniel was gone. Her mother was in the hospital, and she was 7 months pregnant with a baby who would grow up in a home that looked nothing like the one Sophie had imagined. Had she just made the biggest mistake of her life by sending Daniel away? Or had she finally taken the first step toward reclaiming her dignity and building a life worth living? Only time would tell, and the night ahead stretched long and dark and full of impossible questions. Sophie woke to sunlight streaming through the guest room curtains and a moment of blissful confusion before reality crashed back in. The baby shower. Lucy, Daniel's hand on her hip, her mother's collapse. Daniel packing his bags and walking out the door. It all rushed back like a wave pulling her under, and she had to press her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out. Maya was asleep in the chair beside the bed, her neck bent at an uncomfortable angle, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She had refused to leave Sophie alone last night, staying up with her until exhaustion finally dragged them both into fitful sleep. Sophie felt a rush of gratitude so intense it made her throat tight. What would she have done without Maya? How did people survive heartbreak without friends who loved them enough to sleep in uncomfortable chairs? Sophie's phone buzzed on the nightstand, and she reached for it carefully, trying not to wake Maya. There were 17 missed calls from Daniel, 12 text messages and 3 voicemails. She scrolled through the messages, each one more desperate than the last. Please talk to me. I can't sleep knowing you're angry with me. I love you, please believe me. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. Sophie deleted them all without responding. She couldn't deal with Daniel right now. She had bigger things to worry about, like her mother lying in a hospital bed fighting to recover from the stress Daniel had caused. Sophie needed to get to the hospital, needed to see Alina with her own eyes and make sure she was truly okay. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, and the movement woke Maya. Her friend's eyes opened immediately, alert despite the awkward position she had slept in. How are you feeling? Maya asked, sitting up and stretching. Like I've been hit by a truck, Sophie admitted. But I need to get to the hospital, I need to see my mom. Maya nodded and stood, folding the blanket neatly. Let me make you some breakfast first. You need to eat something for the baby. Sophie wanted to argue, but her stomach growled, betraying her. She hadn't eaten anything since yesterday afternoon, before the world fell apart. Maya led her to the kitchen and sat her down at the table while she rummaged through the fridge, pulling out eggs and bread and starting to cook. The normality of it felt surreal. Maya cracking eggs into a pan, the smell of toast browning, morning light filling the kitchen. As if this were any other Sunday morning instead of the morning after Sophie's life had imploded. But Sophie was grateful for the routine, for the way Maya moved through the kitchen with purpose and efficiency, making sure Sophie was fed and cared for even when Sophie couldn't care for herself. They ate in comfortable silence, and Sophie felt strength returning to her body with each bite. She would need that strength for what came next, for facing her mother, for making decisions about her future, for figuring out how to be a single mother if that's what she decided. The drive to the hospital was quiet except for Lagos traffic and the occasional honk of impatient drivers. Maya drove while Sophie stared out the window, watching the city wake up, vendors setting up their stalls, people hurrying to church in their Sunday best. Life was going on as normal for everyone else, oblivious to the fact that Sophie's world had shattered. At the hospital, they made their way through the now familiar corridors to Elena's room. Sophie's heart was pounding as she approached the door, terrified of what she might find. But when she pushed it open, Elena was sitting up in bed, colour back in her cheeks, looking tired but alert. "Mom," Sophie breathed, rushing to her side. Elena's face lit up with a smile. "There you are, baby girl. I was starting to think you'd forgotten about your old mother." Sophie laughed and it came out half sob. "Never, how are you feeling?" "Like I got trampled by a herd of cattle," Elena said with a weak smile. "But the doctors say I'm going to be fine. My heart is stronger than they expected. Takes more than one worthless son-in-law to finish me off." Sophie felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of relief this time. Her mother was okay. Elena was going to survive this. "I was so scared," Sophie whispered. Elena took her daughter's hand and squeezed it. "I know, sweetheart, but I'm not going anywhere. Someone's got to be around to help you raise that grandbaby of mine." She paused, her expression growing serious. "Where's Daniel?" "I sent him away," Sophie said quietly. "Last night, I told him to pack a bag and leave." Elena's eyes filled with pride and something that looked like relief. "Good, that's good, Sophie." "Is it?" Sophie asked, and all her doubts came pouring out. "Mom, I'm 7 months pregnant. I'm about to have a baby and I just kicked out the father. What if I made a mistake? What if I'm being too harsh?" He said it was just a moment of weakness, that nothing physical happened. Elena's grip on her hand tightened. "Sophie, listen to me very carefully. I've lived a lot longer than you, and I've seen a lot of marriages, good ones and bad ones. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that what you saw wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a moment of truth." "What do you mean?" Sophie asked. "Men who respect their wives don't put themselves in positions where they can be accused of impropriety," Elena explained. "Even if nothing physical happened, which I doubt, Daniel's behavior showed you exactly how much he values your feelings and your marriage. He chose to be alone with that woman in your baby's nursery while you were hosting a party. That tells you everything you need to know about his priorities." Sophie felt something settle in her chest, heavy but solid. Her mother was right. It wasn't about whether Daniel had physically cheated. It was about the choice he made to betray her trust, to prioritize whatever he was getting from Lucy over his wife's feelings and his family's well-being. "But what about the baby?" Sophie asked, placing her hand on her belly. "Doesn't a child deserve to have both parents?" Elena's expression grew fierce. "A child deserves to have parents who respect each other. A child deserves to grow up seeing healthy relationships, not watching their mother accept disrespect and betrayal. You staying with Daniel and pretending everything's fine would teach your child that love means tolerating mistreatment. Is that the lesson you want to pass on?" Sophie shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. No, that's not what I want." "Then you already know what you need to do," Elena said softly. "I know it's scary, sweetheart. I know you're terrified of raising this baby alone. But you won't be alone. You have me, you have Maya, you have people who love you and will support you. And more importantly, you have yourself. You're stronger than you think." The door opened and a nurse walked in, clipboard in hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to check Mrs. Okonkwo's vitals." Sophie stepped back to give the nurse room, and Maya, who had been standing quietly by the door, moved to Sophie's side. The nurse worked efficiently, checking Elena's blood pressure and heart rate and making notes on her chart. "Everything looks good," the nurse said with a smile. "If these numbers stay stable, you might be able to go home tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Sophie asked, hope blooming in her chest. "Tomorrow," the nurse confirmed. "Your mother's recovery has been remarkable. She's very lucky." After the nurse left, Elena looked at Sophie with determination in her eyes. "When I get out of here, we're going to sit down and make a plan, figure out what you need to do next. But right now, I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Sophie said. "Promise me you won't let Daniel manipulate you while I'm stuck in this bed," Elena said. "Promise me you'll trust your instincts and remember your worth. And promise me that whatever decision you make, you'll make it for yourself and your baby, not because you're afraid of being alone." Sophie nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Elena pulled her down into a hug, and Sophie rested her head on her mother's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume and feeling like a child again, safe and protected in her mother's arms. "I promise," Sophie whispered. They stayed like that for a long moment, mother and daughter, drawing strength from each other. Then Elena pulled back and looked at Sophie with eyes full of love and wisdom. "Now go home and rest. You look exhausted, and that baby needs you to take care of yourself." Sophie wanted to argue, wanted to stay at the hospital all day, but she knew her mother was right. She was exhausted, drained from lack of sleep and emotional turmoil. And the baby had been kicking restlessly all morning, as if protesting the stress flooding through Sophie's system. "I'll come back this evening," Sophie said, kissing her mother's forehead. "I'll be here," Elena promised with a smile, "not like I'm going anywhere." Sophie and Maya made their way back through the hospital corridors and out into the Lagos heat. The sun was high now, beating down relentlessly, and the parking lot shimmered with waves of heat. Sophie's phone buzzed again, and she pulled it out to see another text from Daniel. "I'm outside the hospital. I saw your car. Please just give me 5 minutes." Sophie's heart jumped into her throat. She looked up and saw him standing near Maya's car, still wearing the same wrinkled clothes from yesterday, his face haggard and desperate. He started walking toward them the moment he spotted them. Maya tensed beside her. "Want me to tell him to get lost?" Sophie took a deep breath, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Trust your instincts, remember your worth, make decisions for yourself and your baby." "No," she said quietly, "I need to do this." Daniel stopped a few feet away, as if afraid to come closer. "Sophie, thank you for seeing me. I know you probably don't want to, but I couldn't stay away. Not when your mom is in the hospital because of what I did." "What do you want, Daniel?" Sophie asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "I want to make this right," Daniel said. "I've been up all night thinking about what I did, about how I hurt you, and I realize now that sorry isn't enough. Actions are what matter. So I'm here to tell you that I'm going to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." Sophie looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since the nursery, she didn't feel the overwhelming pull of their history together. She didn't feel the love that had once bound them. She just felt tired and sad and ready to be done with the pain. "Daniel, I need you to be honest with me about something," Sophie said. "And I mean really honest, not the version that makes you look better or that you think I want to hear. The truth." Daniel's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "Okay, I'll tell you the truth." "How long has this been going on with Lucy?" Sophie asked. "And don't tell me it was just that one moment. I saw the way you looked at each other. That wasn't the first time." Daniel's face went pale, and Sophie knew before he even opened his mouth that her instinct had been right. Had she been living with a stranger all this time? Was the man she married even real, or just a carefully constructed illusion about to finally crumble? Daniel's silence stretched between them like a chasm, deep and impossible to cross. Sophie watched the emotions flicker across his face, guilt and fear and resignation, and she knew with terrible certainty that her worst suspicions were about to be confirmed. The Lagos sun beat down on them mercilessly, but Sophie felt cold all the way through to her bones. "How long?" she asked again, her voice quiet but unyielding. Daniel's shoulders sagged and he looked down at his feet. 3 months, he whispered. "It's been going on for about 3 months." The words hit Sophie like a physical blow. 3 months. While she had been glowing with pregnancy and planning their nursery and dreaming about their future as a family, Daniel had been carrying on something with Lucy. 3 months of lies and secret glances and touches that didn't belong to his wife. Sophie felt bile rise in her throat, and she had to take several deep breaths to keep from being sick right there in the hospital parking lot. 3 months, Sophie repeated, and her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "You've been lying to me for 3 months." "It wasn't supposed to happen," Daniel said desperately. "It started so innocently. We were working late on a project together and we just started talking. At first it was just friendship, I swear. But then it became something more and I didn't know how to stop it." Maya let out a sound of pure disgust. "You didn't know how to stop it. It's called keeping your hands to yourself and remembering you have a pregnant wife at home. Most married men seem to manage that just fine." Daniel flinched but pressed on, his words tumbling out in a rush. "I know how it sounds, I know how terrible it is, but I never slept with her, Sophie. I swear to God, we never went that far. It was just talking and maybe some flirting, and that one time you saw us in the nursery where things got a little too close, but nothing physical ever happened." Sophie felt something crack open inside her, and suddenly she was laughing, a harsh and broken sound that made Daniel take a step back. "Nothing physical. Daniel, you had your hand on her hip. You were whispering in her ear. You were having an emotional affair for 3 months while I was carrying your child. And you want me to feel better because you didn't sleep with her." "I'm trying to be honest," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "You asked for the truth and I'm giving it to you." "The truth," Sophie said, and her laughter died as quickly as it had started. "The truth is that while I was worried about stretch marks and baby names and whether we were ready to be parents, you were building intimacy with another woman. The truth is that every time I asked if something was wrong and you said you were just tired or stressed, You were lying. The truth is that my mother is in that hospital because she found out the kind of man you really are." Daniel's face crumpled and tears started streaming down his cheeks. "I know, God, Sophie, I know, and I hate myself for it. I've spent every second since you caught us wishing I could take it back, wishing I had been stronger, wishing I had been the husband you deserved." "But you weren't," Sophie said simply. "You weren't the husband I deserved, and I need to accept that and move on." Daniel's head snapped up, panic flooding his features. "Move on, what does that mean?" Sophie took a deep breath, and in that moment she felt her mother's strength flowing through her veins, felt Maya's unwavering support at her side, felt the baby moving inside her belly, a reminder of why she needed to be brave. "It means I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between them, final and irreversible. Daniel stared at her as if she had slapped him, his mouth opening and closing but no sound coming out. Maya squeezed Sophie's hand, a silent message of support and pride. "No," Daniel finally managed. "No, Sophie, please, don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Lucy. I'll do whatever you want, just please don't give up on us." Sophie felt tears streaming down her own face now, but they were different from the tears she had cried yesterday. These weren't tears of shock or grief. These were tears of release, of finally letting go of something that had been weighing her down for longer than she wanted to admit. "I'm not giving up on us, Daniel. You already did that when you chose to betray me. I'm just accepting reality." "But the baby," Daniel said desperately. "What about our baby? Don't they deserve to have both parents together?" Sophie's hand moved protectively to her belly. "Our baby deserves to have parents who respect each other. And right now, I don't respect you. I don't know if I ever will again. Maybe with time we can figure out how to co-parent in a healthy way, but I can't stay married to someone I don't trust." Daniel took a step toward her, his hands outstretched. "Sophie, I love you. I know I messed up terribly, but I love you. I love our baby. I love the life we built together. Please don't throw it all away because of one mistake." 3 months isn't one mistake," Sophie said firmly. 3 months is a choice you made every single day. Every time you texted her, every time you met with her, every time you laughed with her and shared things with her that should have been shared with me, you chose her over your family. And I deserve better than that. Our baby deserves better than that. Maya stepped forward, her voice cold and protective. "You need to back up and give her space. She's told you what she wants and you need to respect that." Daniel looked at Maya with something like hatred, as if she were the enemy instead of just a friend protecting someone she loved. "This is between me and my wife." "Your wife just told you she wants a divorce," Maya shot back. "So maybe you should start listening to her instead of trying to manipulate her into changing her mind." Daniel turned back to Sophie, desperation written all over his face. "Just think about it, please. Don't make any permanent decisions right now. You're emotional and tired and your mom just had a health scare. Give yourself time to process everything before you decide to end our marriage." Sophie looked at him, and for a moment she saw flashes of their past. Daniel on one knee proposing to her on the beach. Daniel holding her hand through morning sickness. Daniel painting the nursery while she directed from a chair, her belly already too big to help. There had been good times. There had been love and laughter and hope for the future. But those memories felt like they belonged to different people, a different version of Daniel and Sophie who had trusted each other completely. "I've already thought about it," Sophie said quietly. "I thought about it all night while you were sleeping wherever you went. I thought about it while I was driving here to see my mother. And I thought about it just now while you were confirming that you've been lying to me for months. This isn't an emotional decision, Daniel. This is the clearest decision I've made in a long time." Daniel's face twisted with pain, and for a moment Sophie almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then she remembered his hand on Lucy's hip, remembered the intimate way they had stood together, remembered 3 months of lies, and the sympathy died before it could take root. "You'll regret this," Daniel said, and there was bitterness creeping into his voice now. "You'll be a single mother struggling to raise a child alone, and you'll realize you threw away a good thing because you couldn't forgive one mistake." Maya moved between them, her eyes blazing. "Did you just threaten her? Did you seriously just try to scare her about being a single mother?" Sophie put a hand on Maya's arm, gently pulling her back. "It's okay, let him say what he needs to say." She looked at Daniel, and she felt nothing but pity for this man who thought love meant accepting betrayal, who thought a good marriage was worth sacrificing dignity and self-respect. "I won't regret this, Daniel. The only thing I might regret is not seeing who you really were sooner. But I won't regret choosing myself and my child over a man who doesn't know how to honor his commitments." Daniel's face hardened, the mask of remorse slipping to reveal anger underneath. "Fine. If that's how you want it, then fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize how hard it is to do this alone. Don't expect me to just forgive and forget when you change your mind. I won't, Sophie promised. But I will expect you to be a good father to our child, whatever else happens between us. That baby didn't ask for any of this, and they deserve to have a father who shows up and takes responsibility. Daniel laughed bitterly. Don't worry, I'll take care of my responsibilities. My lawyer will be in touch about custody arrangements and child support. Since you want to do this the hard way, we'll do it the hard way. He turned and walked away, his shoulders stiff with anger, and Sophie watched him go without calling him back. Maya wrapped an arm around her waist, supporting her as her legs suddenly felt weak. Are you okay? Maya asked softly. Sophie nodded, even though she wasn't entirely sure it was true. I will be, eventually. They stood there in the parking lot for a long moment, watching Daniel's car disappear into Lagos traffic. Sophie felt strange, hollowed out, but also somehow lighter, like she had been carrying a heavy burden without realizing it, and someone had finally lifted it from her shoulders. Let's go home, Maya said. You need to rest. But Sophie shook her head. No, let's go back inside. I want to see my mom again. I want to tell her I did it. I want her to know I was brave. Maya smiled, pride shining in her eyes. She's going to be so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. They walked back through the hospital doors, past the reception desk, and down the familiar corridors to Elena's room. When they entered, Elena took one look at Sophie's face and knew immediately what had happened. You told him, Elena said, not a question but a statement. I told him I want a divorce, Sophie confirmed, moving to her mother's bedside. And he confirmed that he's been carrying on with Lucy for 3 months, so I made the right choice. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pride. She pulled Sophie into a fierce hug, careful of the IV line in her arm. That's my girl, my strong, wise girl. Sophie felt herself breaking down again, but this time it wasn't from pain or fear. It was from relief and love and the overwhelming gratitude that she had a mother who supported her even when the choice was hard. She cried into Elena's shoulder while Maya rubbed circles on her back. And in that moment, surrounded by the 2 women who loved her most, Sophie felt something she hadn't felt since walking into that nursery. She felt hope. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be lawyers and custody arrangements, and the challenge of raising a child mostly on her own. There would be lonely nights and moments of doubt and times when she wondered if she had made the right choice. But she would face all of it with her dignity intact, with her mother's wisdom guiding her, with Maya's friendship supporting her, and with the knowledge that she had chosen herself and her child over a man who didn't deserve either of them. It's finally over, Sophie whispered against her mother's shoulder. No, baby, Elena said softly, stroking her hair. It's just beginning, and I couldn't ask for a better daughter. You're going to be an amazing mother, and you're going to build a beautiful life for yourself and that grandbaby of mine. Sophie pulled back and wiped her eyes, managing a watery smile. Thank you, Mom, for everything, for being strong when I couldn't be, for telling me the truth even when it was hard, for loving me enough to let me make my own choices. Always, Elena promised, I will always be here for you. Maya moved closer, wrapping both Sophie and Elena in a group hug. And I'm not going anywhere either. You're stuck with me, Supermom. Sophie laughed through her tears, and in that laugh was the sound of healing beginning, of strength returning, of a woman who had been broken but refused to stay that way. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick strong and steady, and she made a silent promise to the child growing inside her. I will show you what it means to be strong. I will teach you that love should never cost you your dignity. I will raise you to know your worth and never settle for less than you deserve. And I will love you with everything I have, every single day of your life. The baby kicked again as if in response, and Sophie smiled. Her marriage was over. Her heart was broken. Her life looked nothing like she had planned. But somehow, standing in that hospital room with her mother and her best friend, with a new life growing inside her and a future full of possibilities ahead, Sophie felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She felt free. And that freedom, painful as it was to earn, was worth more than any life-filled marriage could ever be. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notification bell, so that when we drop another video, you'll be the first to be notified. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.